Welcome to YOUCANIC. Today here in YOUCANIC we have a 2008 Toyota Camry, and we're going to go over how you change the front brakes on this vehicle. So to start with, you're going to raise the vehicle, you're going to support it on jack stands and blocks, and the tires to be chalked, right? And then you're going to remove the front tire, and I have the steering turned to the right for ease of access to get to the bolts we need to do. So we have two bolts here that are size 14, two bolts this is what holds the caliper to the carrier. Then we have two bolts that hold the carrier to the hub. They're size 17. And then everything that goes there. So we'll start by loosening the top one, removing the bottom one on this caliper, and then that way we can twist it up to be able to push it back. And because this is going to be tight on here, we're going to take the screwdriver and get in here and just depress the caliper a little bit, because we're going to press it back otherwise, but we just want to depress it a little bit so that it's easy to move. Okay, so this is a size 14. And if it spun over here, you would put a 17 on this one to hold it so that you can loosen and remove this one. Okay, so with that one loose and with the depressed caliper, we can now spin this up. And while we've got it up there, let's go ahead and push that. Okay, so we spin it up and we're just going to let it sit up there for a moment. And in the meantime, we'll pop these little clips off. Our kit has new ones, so we don't need to save these. Some kits don't, so you may want to save those. Pop our old brakes out. Take one of them, or I like to take one, and place it up in here. And then take the pusher tool and push that piston back. Perfect. So I like to use a brake to push it, because that way you won't ever push it further than the caliper will allow. Okay. So now that the caliper is pushed back, you can go ahead and remove this other screw, and then we're going to set the caliper over here on the shield to hold it up. If you had a hanger, you could hang it up too. Okay, next we got to get this carrier off. And so to get the carrier off, we need our size 17. Right. So now we've got the carrier off. It's not going to come off. So we're going to go ahead and tap it off. All that rust gets in there and gets it stuck on here. So you do have to use, sometimes you have to use a hammer to get it off. Everything a good quick shot of brake cleaner. It keeps the brake dust down, and then that way not as much of that dust is in the air. Also not a bad idea to wear a mask while you're working on the brakes, so you're not breathing that dust. So while that's drying off, we're going to prepare our carriers, and we're going to replace these because we have them in our kit. If not, you just leave these alone. But we have new ones in our kit. So we're going to pop these off. One thing you're going to want to remember when you put the new ones on, you see how this tab faces the front of the caliper? We want to make sure that we do the same when we put the new ones on. They can kind of, you can really only go on one way, but you do want to remember that orientation. You see, we want to make sure that this tab here is facing out, and this one does too, because these will keep the brakes from not riding on the. Okay, we've got those aligned and in place. Next, we're gonna need to. We want to pop these out. The bolts for the slides, or the glide pins. They're pretty kind of stiff, so we're going to pop this cover here, and we're going to clean this old grease off with a paper towel. And then we're going to apply some new grease. This is just disc brake caliper grease. There's all various different colors, but you want to use the grease that's sold for disc brake calipers. So, because it's a high temperature grease. Sometimes they're pretty stiff to turn, so if you put just because it's a 17, you can put a 17 and you can get it to turn to pull out. I like to do one at a time because one of them has this little metal sleeve on it. I'm not so certain whether it has to go in one or the other, but if you do one at a time, you don't mix it up. So it's all greased, lubed up. Just going to insert it. Depending on the brake, sometimes they're kind of a pain when you try to put them in when they're up on there. So this, we're going to preload them because they've been a pain in the past where while you're trying to put them on, these tabs catch when it's mounted up on the hub itself. Okay, so that one's in. Let's put this one in. So we have our brakes sitting in there. So now you gotta get a rotor. Now because this rotor doesn't have a set screw, we're just gonna use a nut. So here, we got our rotor. And because this rotor doesn't have a set screw that holds it in, I'm just gonna use a nut to hold it on so that when we're putting the carrier on and the caliper, the whole rotor's not moving around and flopping and messing us up. So you just take your carrier. It's got our brakes on it. Make sure that when you do put the brakes on, they kind of round, that it follows the roundness of the rotor. Then you're going to take the size 17 bolts, put them from the back. Okay, so we've installed the 17s, we've tightened them up. we're just going to squeeze these together, and then, because we have the new ones, we're going to, there's little holes on the discs, or on the brakes themselves, that you're going to install these, with these aiming toward the middle. These are just a spring to also help the brakes from not just riding on the rotor while you're driving. Okay, so I'm going to take a caliper. You may have to still push those brakes in a little bit to get them to go around there. So we're going to install that. And also with the spring, it's pushing the pushes the caliper away a little bit, so you may have to kind of press it in. And size 14. Snug those up, good to go. Then after that, you would just put your tire on, snug it, put your vehicle on the ground, and then torque the tire to spec. And so that's how you replace your front brakes on your 2008 Toyota Camry. Thanks for watching YOUCANIC, where you can be the mechanic.